Hello and good evening. I teach design to fashion students, to young creative minds. And before every session, I wonder whether will I be able to connect, inspire and empower them. My profession as a teacher really humbles me because I see myself as an important link between individuals, their hopes, their aspirations, their dreams, their future, a house of tomorrow that poet Khalil Gibran says that I cannot even dream of visiting. So, to inspire the inspired, I need to stay inspired. And what I realized, what keeps me going, what keeps me connected and rooted, are simple acts of observation of everyday life. As a young student of fashion many years ago, I befriended two tools, the scissor and the needle. Both of them in different ways introduced me to the stitch. In the next 10 minutes, let me share the power, the incredible power of that stitch. Sometimes musing on it, and sometimes becoming one with that stitch. I am that stitch. Do you remember the first run of the stitch that Ma taught on a hot summer afternoon? Picking and piercing, leaving a mark behind. She told a million stories, stitching my childhood with hers, with a small village in Bihar. In that patchwork of lives, I learned rhythm from the needle. I am that stitch, the memory of that companionship. Today I miss my mother. In those moments, through those stitches, she taught me a lesson of lifetime. She said, everything breathes, that I can infuse new life. She said the continuity of life was more important than anything else. She spoke of mending, reusing, of life within life of every fabric. That against all odds, I could always run as a stitch and hold things together for a little longer. That I could mend hearts if I could fill it up with patterns of colors. I didn't realize that in those pages of childhood, something extraordinary was being scripted. She was actually passing down the intangible wisdom of her generation, the collective memory of many generations to the next. Very simply, through the tales of ordinary stitches. When I grew up, I could spend hours filling up surfaces with million stitches, small ones, big ones, random, overlapping, crossing over. What folded before my eyes, this world, was fascinating. I could see stitches in everything, everywhere. From stapler pins to the dent on the copper utensils, to the sutures of stitches on my own skin. Everything was being seen through stitches. In 2017, a passing conversation about a stitch with a childhood friend took me to a small village in Kishanganj, Bihar, to meet a group of women from a migrant Muslim community, to see their craft of quilted textiles. What I saw was like nothing that I'd seen before. Stitches, smallest of stitches, starting from a simple guideline. These women, with just needle and tools, were filling up complete quilts, every inch of it, through hundreds and thousands of stitches. They were the most colorful ones that I'd ever seen. They were reversible. And in those stitches, very silently held together, were the years gone by, the lives that they lived, the experiences that these women had had. What I held in my hand was not a textile. It was actually the texture of life that resonated with what Ma had spoken about. I was excited. I took these textiles to experts and I realized that it had not been documented at all. Nobody had heard of these communities and their crafts. What followed was a series of research, documentation, presentations, exhibitions at national and international level. I wanted the world to see these stitches. I wanted the world to hear the stories. I wanted the world to come and connect with these incredible women. The joy of discovering the power of stitch. Finally, when the world really did see these textiles, it took them time to fathom that what they held, what they saw, was actually hand embroidered, was hand stitched, and was not woven. Such was the intensity of those textiles. As an appreciation, I wanted to become that stitch, the voice of the anonymous. I'm that stitch. Come with me. Look at me closer still. Do you see me? I'm the companion of those Sheshabadi women. Have you heard of them? Probably not. The ones who married the soldiers of the Emperor Sheshasuri. The ones who are still tilling the land for last 400 years between the delta of rivers. The ones who own very little and yet find time to run me through on worn out fabrics. They say, what comes from the weaver, what comes off the loom, what's woven, what's worn, is all very precious, not to be discarded. They call me Kheta. I ran stitches, I made rows and rows. One stitch forward, one stitch back, following the previous line. As the needle marched forward, I ran in diagonals. I filled up those quills with colors and geometric patterns. In those layers of Kheta, I wrapped stories and tales. Stories of communities, of identities, of migration, of displacement, of settlement, of grief, of sorrows, of resilience, of perseverance. Very similar to the rhythmic uprooting and transplanting of saplings in their verdant paddy fields. I am that stitch, the breather of new life to those old saris, those carefully collected old saris. In that delta of expressions, I became the breeze over the river, the earthworm, the container, the basket, the cluster of flowers, the beetle leaf. And when one day floods came and took all away, swept all away, every year in fact, I found these women finding comfort in me, for me to hold the newborn, for me to become the cover when there was none, to become Ma's blessings when the new bride left her village, to become the livelihood when they started afresh. I am that stitch, the mark of their tenacity. In 2017, something incredible happened. Just 2 years after I returned from Kishanganj, the very spot where I stood with those Sheshabadi women was swept away with floods. I tried getting in touch with them, but I couldn't. As days passed by, I lost hope of hearing from them. And then one fine day, out of the blue, about 1.5 months later, I got these images. When the very existence was being swept away, these women had remembered to carry their needle and thread and fill up every inch of the fabric that had left behind. When everything was gone, they carried hope. Today, the world over, communities and their craft practices are struggling to keep afloat and may just disappear if all of us, especially the young generation, doesn't sit up and take cognizance of what's really happening. Young generation like yours. For communities, stitch is an identity. It is the only constant in their ever-changing world. In their humble expression, this stitch not only holds, not only gathers, it not only binds, it patches, it mends, it layers, it traces, it hems, it repairs. But most importantly, for these women, it gives hope, happiness, and humility to see them through the trying times of geopolitical crisis, through loss and grief, to see them through the darkness of marginalization and persecution. I'm humbled yet again by the power of that mundane stitch. It has taught me that distinct identities are important, yet merging with humanity at large is more important. It has taught me to connect with the struggles and victories of a common man. It has taught me that I can transcend boundaries and empower lives. It has taught me resilience, mindfulness. It has taught me to slow down, one stitch at a time. Thank you.